Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live chat. I'm going to be bringing my friend Rob Jacobs on today to talk about hormones, how exercise can help our hormones instead of perhaps causing dysfunction of hormones, some common misconceptions about this. So I'm going to wait to ask Rob if he wants to join, waiting for him to come on. And I'm going to post this on YouTube, so you might be watching this on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, if I say something is linked in my bio, then you can just check down in the show notes, but I am going to post this on YouTube as well. Come on. Good morning, everyone. Hopping in. Good afternoon to my friends in the UK, across the pond. There he is. All right. Hey, Rob. How's it
Hello,
going?
hello.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm all right. How are you?
Doing well. Doing well. Just out here in my yard, which is also a construction zone. I apologize for the noise. Um, yeah, I thought it'd be fun to come on and chat. We are starting our quantum exercise course tomorrow, and today's the last day to get the pre-sale pricing is $100 off because tomorrow we're going to be starting Zoom meetings where we're going to take questions live from people who are doing the course. So I just wanted to jump on and do a quick live stream with you to talk about this hormone and exercise thing because I think it's just something that it's hard for people to wrap their heads around. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a big deal. Like they can, the type of exercise you have can have a very acute response on multiple hormones, and that can be positive, it can be negative. And then that short-term acute response can lead to lasting changes in your physiology that can then promote a bit more of a long-term change in some of your hormones, again, to the good side or potentially to the bad side.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people that are on my page, and you've got a lot of coaches and more athletic people that kind of follow you. A lot of people that follow me, they're more on the side of like, I'm repairing my hormones. I just want to feel better and I want to start doing some movement. But I've been told that certain types of exercise are going to make my cortisol issues worse, right? So let's talk to those people a little bit.
Yeah, so an increase in cortisol is your friend during exercise, right? Because it helps mobilize energy, and cortisol is not always the bad guy, like we talk about in the
Right.
course. However, an abundance of almost anything can be pretty negative, right? You take too much vitamin C, you're going to have an issue in the bathroom, or the same thing with even something like magnesium. So what we know with training is that specific modalities become much harder to recover from. So demanding nervous system work, hard, intense strength work, which we're fans of, which everyone should do at some point once you're ready for it. But that is probably the hardest thing to recover from when you are overstressed, when you are most likely underfed, if your immune system isn't functioning properly, again, probably because you're overstressed, because those things are so hard to recover from and they demand so many resources. So, one of the things that we'll teach you in the course is that higher volume kind of, to say it simplistically, training where you chase the pump, which is typically higher repetition, higher volume work, is one of the best ways you can start to exercise when your hormones are kind of out of whack or when you can't recover from heavy, intense, strength work.
Yeah, that's like I said, a lot of people are just, I think, scared to even do anything. But like you said, we want to elicit a positive change from exercise. So there are types, like you were saying, with the higher reps, where that can actually help to bring hormones a little bit more back into balance when we're combining it with an overall lifestyle program, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, even if you need to build strength at the same time, manipulating your rest interval where, a shorter rest break prevents you from lifting a hard, heavy neurological weight, which are tricks that we use for athletes to, get them stronger and leaner at the same time. That's something that you can learn how to do if you're someone who likes to lift on the heavier side. But if you find yourself in this jacked up cortisol, or even if you're older, right, once we start to get into 50s, 60s, 70s, your immune system can be not not inept at or not great at responding to hard heavy training. So you do have to have a little bit of at least an alternation. So you can use the higher volume stuff, in the majority, and then occasionally sprinkle in some strength work. So you don't have to always do a month of high volume, a month of hard heavy strength, and these typical like accumulation intensification things that we teach in, the kind of the Poliquin lineage. You can do 3 or 4 weeks of higher volume and 1 or 2 weeks of strength training, right? There's a lot of ways to skin this cat where you can still do things that you love and not, beat yourself into the ground every single day when you try to do this.
Exactly. And I think that's what scares people away, is that they're like, if I don't do high intensity interval training every day, I'm not going to lose any weight, and it's just not even worth it. I'm not getting any benefit from it. I think it's this kind of all or nothing approach that people have when it comes to exercise. And then they're like, well, if I can't do that, then I might as well just not do anything.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's a ton of ways to get around this. So like, I'll use myself as an example. A couple of years ago, my hormones tanked after training for a competition. It was right before COVID, so everything was super stressed. Like, are we going to close? Am I going to be able to make any money? Is this competition going to get canceled? You spend 6 months of a year training for a very important competition. So the training is stressful. Everything that was going on in the world was stressful. I had really crappy neighbors, so I wasn't sleeping. That was just a colossal mess. So all my hormones just plummeted, and it took a while to recover from that. And one of the things I did is I shifted from, a solid 45 minutes to 60 minutes of heavy, intense strength work 4 days a week to 20-minute workouts at a higher frequency. So I cut down my duration every day to where I could still, it was short enough of a workout where I could actually still go really hard for, relatively speaking, for as hard as I could go. But because what happens with most of us is it's not necessarily going hard, it's the volume in which you go hard lots of times, right? Especially in terms of the nervous system. It's not just doing one set of an all-out hard heavy effort, it's doing multiple sets of those. So one way to get around that is to cut down the sets, and you can actually increase your frequency. So I went from training 4 days a week to training 6 days a week, but only training really about 20 minutes. And I got leaner, I got stronger, I got healthier again. Like one of the things I look at for mitochondrial dysfunction is your ability to sweat, because that can, be related to essentially mitochondrial dehydration and a whole host of things. And that style of training and that program really helped me fix and recover some of that stuff to where I wasn't beating myself into the ground every day and not being able to recover from it.
Yeah. So Dory asked a little bit ago, what is an example of higher volume? That just means you're doing like a bunch of sets of one exercise. Is that what you mean by that?
So usually when we talk about volume, we're looking more at, so there can be multiple definitions for this, but basically how I'm referencing it here in the context of this discussion is repetitions per set. So, each individual person can have an individual definition of high volume, right? So for me personally, because I'm a strength athlete, high volume for me is 8 to 10 reps. Like that's very high volume for me in the course of a year or in the course of a day. Like I will rarely do sets of 8 to 10 in the course of a year when I'm healthy. Now for the average person, high volume can be anywhere from 15 to 20 upwards of 40 to 50. So obviously if we're talking 40 to 50 reps in one set, that's going to be, very lightweight, even for strong individuals. I've had strong people doing 50 repetition things with maybe 5-pound dumbbells. So these are people who can squat 300-400 pounds, right? So that part is kind of relative, and it can also be relative to the equipment you have access to. We talked about that in the course. If you're working out at home, high volume is probably going to be a little bit higher, because if you only have body weight, there's only so many times you can do 20 body weight squats and it actually still be challenging. Right. So you have to figure out some way to add time, essentially, right? Volume can also be a function of time, how long the set takes, if you don't have weight. So for most people, high volume is going to be 15 to 25, and then really high volume, probably pushing above 25. So if you're lifting weight and lifting weights to the best of your ability, 15 to 25 is your high volume for the most part.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. And someone says they're recovering from a traumatic brain injury. and not recovering well from exercise right now, which would make sense because that's a big nervous system injury that she's dealing with. She wants to know, would you recommend these kind of 20-minute sessions that you're talking about for a situation like that?
So you probably don't want to start increasing frequency after an intense brain injury. I would probably, if it was one of my athletes, would start them on like once out of every 5 days. So that doesn't sound like much, but what you don't want to do is show up and not train hard. If you don't have the ability to train hard, you're better off just actually not training, right? Because you don't want to go in and just put a half-assed effort into your workout if you don't feel like it. So by training once every 5 days, you should have a long recovery period. And then eventually, every few weeks, you can start to go 2 every 5 days, and then maybe 3 every 7, right? So now you start stretching out into like Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and then eventually maybe Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, those sorts of things. But I think once every 5 days, without a ton of sets, if your recovery is really bad, once every 5 days, 2 to 3 sets, per muscle group, right? Not per exercise, but per muscle, like 2 sets of chest, 2 sets of back, whatever, is going to be plenty. And doing it once every 5 days is going to allow you to do things like total body workouts, which will help you with your body composition. It'll be a little tougher, but because it's total body, it's going to be more of a systemic effect and not so localized to the nervous system.
Yep, absolutely. And somebody wants to know our recommendations on training according to a woman's cycle. And we have a whole module on that in our course that we're released. It's out now, but today's the last day to get $100 off the course, and that's in my bio. But yeah, we have a whole section on that, right, Rob?
Yes, I think 30, 45 minutes worth of what the actual research says in regards to that, and some other considerations like macronutrients and hydration and a few things like that, how those things are affected by the cycle, and what you can do, because there's a lot of bullshit around that concept. So we'll cut through that and actually give you what the facts say.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, essentially, we are talking about the science of everything, but my recommendation to women is always, like Rob says, if you can't go in and you can't train hard and you feel you just don't feel like it, that might be a day that you take a rest day, and that might coincide with the week before your cycle, that there's more days like that, right? Or when you're actually starting your cycle. So that's why we have the Zoom Q&As. Those start tomorrow, where we're going to be able to actually help people kind of walk them through these scenarios. But just as far as all the science goes, you've trained some pretty high level athlete women, correct, Rob?
Yeah, I've had actually all of my Olympians have been females. And so, realistically, there's not a lot of concessions made when we're talking about that level. You got to perform, so you got to perform. But at the same time, if one of those elite level athletes came in and we did a few sets and they were performing worse than they performed last time, no matter where they're at in their cycle, hey, we're done, go home, get some rest, and we're going to try this again later, like tomorrow or the next day. So, unless you're training for some very important type of competition, the standard of, if you come in and can't beat your previous performance, like not match it, but beat it, you're better off not training at all. Because if you feel badly already and go in and have a subpar workout or substandard workout, you're just going to feel worse and you're not performing. So mentally, then there's an effect on that. We're like, oh man, I'm doing so much worse than I did last time. So these things can start to compound. So for any of that stuff, right? No matter what the research says, if the research says it matters, if it says it doesn't matter, some people could be worse on week 2, some people could be worse on week 4, right? There's a whole lot of things to go into this, no matter what the research says. But most importantly, go by your own feel, right? That's the easiest way we can explain it. If you're my client and you tell me you feel like trash one day, stop training, go home, rest, and we'll try it again in a couple days.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think I do have, like I said, a lot of people who are kind of in this repair mode with their hormones. So in our program, we have 2 separate, we have a ton of modules that really explain the science of this, right? About the right time of day to work out, the, macronutrient timing, all of these sorts of things. And then we have a couple of programs. One is more for at home, like rehabilitation. I'm just getting back into working out again. And then another one is like a program that you're going to do at the gym for people who are ready to do that sort of thing. But just kind of going back to that timing, that's such a big question I get all the time of like, what's the best time of day to work out? Like I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and work out because it's the only time I have. And but I also have dysregulated cortisol. So how do you address that situation with people?
So you have to establish what your priority is. So, Charles Poliquin was my mentor, and one of the things he always said was priority means one. So you can't have three priorities, right? You can't want to fix your hormones, train super hard, and only be able to train at the worst possible time of day for fixing your hormones, right? So you have to understand, like, all right, maybe I need to take a couple of weeks off of training so that I can train hard. Because again, there's a dichotomy here of realizing that some exercise is better than no exercise.
Yes.
But in terms of weightlifting, a lack of effort on weightlifting is not necessarily better than not lifting at all, right? Like going for a walk is certainly better than sitting on your ass, but going into the weight room and not training, hard enough to really be productive, you're going to be much better off doing something else, right? Going for a walk, doing yoga, right? Things that aren't just like, that aren't meant to be exhausting. One of the things I always say to my clients is that in the weight room, like failure is basically success. If you're not training hard enough to fail and miss a set or do this or do that, you're not training hard enough, right? Because that is a main driver of response, is training to your best effort with whatever we're doing. So there's a circadian response to exercise, right? So exercising in the morning elicits one response. It elicits it draws on one primary source of fuel, right? And training at the end of the day trains a little bit differently, but then you have to mix your hormones into that. So if your hormones are jacked up because you have a dysfunctional circadian rhythm, then you can't really apply the appropriate time of day to train for your circadian rhythm, right? You have to take a step back, fix the problem, set the rhythm, and then you can follow those rules. So how do you train when you're jacked up? Well, you don't train. You take a week or whatever, like, because there's lots of things you can do, right? Yoga is extremely challenging, right? The last time I did it, I was, I was almost my strongest, and I was, just pouring sweat, trembling. So it was a very challenging workout, but it wasn't neurologically exhausting, right? So there's lots of different things you can do. Now, my perspective on almost everything is that I think weightlifting is hands down the best form of exercise, no matter who you are, no matter what your situation is. But if you've got jacked up cortisol, you can't rely on what cortisol does for you when you do hard, intense exercise. So things like yoga, going for a walk or going for a brisk, walk, those things can be more productive in short intervals of time and for a couple of weeks while you start to fix some of those things.
Yep. And so basically, if someone had a free schedule, like I can do whatever I want any time of the day, and they come to us with this, like, I've got really messed up cortisol. And the thing about cortisol is it runs on a curve, right? It's not just like to say I have high cortisol. Well, you want your cortisol to be higher in the morning and then lower in the evening. And when you go to bed, like pretty much non-existent, right?
Yep.
And to know that you have messed up cortisol, you can go by how you feel. Are you wired but tired at night? Are you having trouble sleeping? Do you have trouble getting going in the mornings? Are you just like, just exhausted in the morning? Like maybe your cortisol patterns are messed up. And cortisol is this master hormone. So it's going to impact all of your downstream hormones. It's going to impact your thyroid. It's going to impact your sex hormones, all of these things. So understanding your cortisol is going to be important. And we go into that in depth in the course. But let's say someone did have extraordinarily like messed up cortisol patterns, maybe low in the morning and then high in the afternoon, middle of the day, evening. How would we have that person approach training?
So training in the morning is going to be really good for that person. It's going to suck at first because
You're tired.
low morning cortisol. It's not going to be fun. But things like exercise and feeding, right, and are very good external cues for the muscle tissues to help start to reset some of their circadian rhythms, right? Once you master the evening side of things, where you're not doing artificial light, where you're not getting dopamine hits from movies or social media or all of those things, then you're starting to decrease that cortisol imbalance in the evening. And then by doing the right types of exercise, or by exercising and doing things like that in the mornings, right? Because just something as simple as getting your heart rate up and increasing your body temperature, that is another non-photic cue to start to help repattern the circadian rhythm, which will help with those messed up cortisol curves, right? So you can simply wake up, see the sun, eat, and go for a brisk walk. You can do that. You can do jump rope for 5 to 10 minutes, right? There's very easy types of exercise you can do to start to repattern that curve. And once the curve is changed back to more circadian appropriate curve, then you can start to introduce things like exercise and get the most from it.
Right. But we like, if someone has like free open schedule to do more strength training, probably like early afternoon, that's going to be a little bit more optimal for people. Again, that's not going to fit into most people's schedules. That's why we have our course, and we're going to do Zoom meetings to kind of help people figure out what's going to be best for them. But that's really, from a circadian standpoint, kind of the most optimal time to strength train, right?
Yeah, it ranges from like 1 to 5, 2 to 5. There's a decent window, kind of depending on when you wake up, at what your natural rhythms are in that instance, right? Most people peak performance ranges between 6 to 8 hours after they wake up, which is going to be hopefully 6 to 8 hours right around sunrise. So that usually puts you in that, that 1 to 5 window, depending on the time of the year, depending on when the sun rises. And at that time of day, what makes it optimal is that your nervous system, right, by that point in the day should be awake, fully functioning. You should be well fed, well nutritioned. So your light environment should have been right. So everything should be functioning optimally. And an optimally functioning nervous system benefits all training modalities, right? If you're just doing a prowler push and you're drowsy, you're not going to push the prowler very hard. If you're optimally coordinated and driven with dopamine and all these things, you're going to push the prowler harder. If you're a performance-driven athlete, you're going to execute the minutia of your track and field start, or your triple jump, or your power clean. You're going to execute those better. And because of all that, protein synthesis tends to be exponentially higher in that window. So if you're training in that window, you can magnify muscle protein synthesis by training in that window and then having feeding right after. But again, most people are typically at work between 1 to 2 to 5. So if you're not really an athlete, you don't necessarily have that luxury.
Right. So then we look at kind of lifestyle and goals and the hormone situation when we're looking at timing, and we have to fit people's lifestyles as well. So if someone, can only exercise at certain times of the day, we do talk about that in the course, and just some different ways that you can mitigate the impact of perhaps approaching a workout at the wrong time of the day, or not an optimal time of day. I'm not going to say wrong, because it's better to move your body than to not, right?
Yeah. So like if you have to train after work, for example, that's, probably going to be 6, 7, 8, sometimes even 9 p.m., which is really not great. Mm-hmm. So you have to take extraordinary measures in that instance. One, you have to make sure that you're not taking stimulants before those training sessions. Those training sessions are more ideal for higher volumes anyway, because of the mitochondrial fission and fusion rhythms, and your natural mitochondrial rhythm fits the hypertrophy training response, which is more dense mitochondria at that time of day rather than more mitochondria, right? So that affects that. So training at that time of day a certain way is going to facilitate sort of optimal recovery, optimal function. But then you may need to take certain things that are calming things, like certain types of magnesium, magnesium glycinate, taurine, several things that, you might not want to take under normal circumstances. But, training raises your cortisol no matter how you train. You want it to. So if I'm getting a cortisol spike at 6, 7, 8 p.m., one, I don't want that to be crazy high, but if it does get up, I need to take a measure to get that down as quickly as possible to try to get it back to normal. which you can do. And that's something that kind of goes with the territory. If you're going to train at 5 or 6 a.m. before the sunrise, there may be certain things that you really want to, make sure you do. Maybe get a red light unit where you can train with some red light on, or if you're in a home gym, use some incandescent bulbs so you're not training under crappy light before the sun rises, right? Training before the sunrise isn't great, but if you're going to do it, we'll mitigate risk as much as we can.
Yeah, exactly. And someone wanted to know how you would approach exercise if they have like chronic Lyme or EBV or some sort of like a chronic illness that they're dealing with. It's kind of the same way that we deal with somebody that has a cortisol issue, right?
Yeah, I mean the people that I know personally who have had Lyme, when there's a flare up, or you train when you feel up to training, and most of the time you don't. Going for walks, again, yoga, those types of things, right? Things that you don't have to go all out on to still get some benefit from in those instances, until the issue is resolved, or at least resolved enough to allow you to not feel like crap when you go in the weight room. Because what ends up happening is somebody like that goes into the weight room when they feel subpar. And if they care about making progress, in results or getting stronger or whatever their goal is, and they go in and they're always performing substandard, subpar, because they feel like crap every day, that person's not going to get better, and it's going to hamper their ability to recover, right? Because the immune system is how you recover from the weight room. So training when you're sick and trying to sweat it out and all that crap is not great when you don't feel well. So you have to set yourself up for success. So going into the weight room when you don't feel 100% is never a good idea.
Right. And that's why we have in the program like an at-home kind of a rehab type of thing. I've actually been doing that because I'll have nights where my son doesn't sleep, and I'm like, hey, trying to go all out with a workout and lift heavy weights and all that is not a great plan for me. So we have this great little at-home program, and then I have uploaded a ton of yoga classes that I taught yoga for 10 years, believe it or not. Actually more than that, but I have a ton of yoga classes in there too. So if you're just like, I need to move because I feel depressed, and it does help to move your body. So walking, the at home kind of a rehab program we have, and it's challenging the way that you have those, oh my gosh, the squatting, which is totally body weight. That is challenging enough. So I feel like I'm actually getting something out of it, right? So I think that can be helpful.
What's the old like motivational saying? If it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. So in that instance, like, I might not be the best person for that individual with Lyme to be working with, because I don't teach yoga,
right?
And do you want to pay me to just tell you to go for a 10-minute walk? Like,
yeah.
So you have to do what's right for you in your current situation. So and also, like, for people in that situation, you need to know that it's okay to not go to the weight room and crush yourself, right?
Right.
Right. Go for multiple walks. Like, just get outside, get your shit together.
Yep.
Improve your health so that you can get the benefits from exercise.
Definitely. Well, I know you have to get going. Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Christine wants to know, what does it mean if I can take a walk in the morning and I have tons of energy, but in the evening I'm too exhausted? I mean, that sounds like a normal cortisol pattern to me.
Yeah. Too exhausted to what? Function? I don't.
Or take a walk. I guess to take a walk.
Yeah. Well, I mean, walk harder in the morning.
Yeah.
Take advantage of it, right? Like, that's. I don't mean that to sound like a smart ass answer, but if you're too tired to exercise in the evening, don't try to exercise in the evening.
Yeah.
Get more out of your time walking. You can try to apply intervals to walking, right? You can walk without running, right? Because I don't think running is great depending on your situation, but you can walk harder, walk easier, walk harder, walk easier, just to try to get more out of it. And believe it or not, mouth taping during low intensity steady state cardio or something like walking, like I actually use mouth taping a lot with my strongman competitors during general preparation phases several months before competition when we're doing cardio. Now, we do it in the context of the weight room, which is brutal. However, if you tape your mouth and walk, like that's a very good marker for training below things like lactate threshold, which are kind of stress. I guess the best way to think about lactate threshold for just the average person would be if you're below the lactate threshold, you're not stressing your body substantially, right? Let's just put it that way. So if you basically you would tape your mouth, and as long as you are maintaining a pace where you don't feel like you need to breathe in through your mouth ever, that's a great pace to maintain through through some of these types of things. And that tremendously helps mitochondria's ability to clear and buffer things like lactate, right? Like we know lactate is it's basically a call to action. So different forms of stress raise lactate because lactate's a fuel source depending on how you're stressed. So different symptoms of stress, like anxiety stress versus worry stress, you can clear that lactate with different modes of exercise. One, you can clear with cardiovascular work, like walking like this, or just going for a jog with your mouth taped, or you can clear it with heavy, intense weight training because of where it goes as a substrate. One goes to the brain, one goes to the heart based on that type of exercise. So utilizing the mouth taping thing, when you're stressed also, right? Like if you have an acute stressor, right? This is just like you get an email and now you're stressed about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just keep the mouth closed if you don't want to look like a like a goofball. And I mean, that's really hard. Like I do that walking the dog quite a bit because he's got a retriever pace, which is just kind of for me, it's a very slow jog. It's too fast for me to walk, but it's a super slow jog. So when he kicks in that pace, that's one of the things that I will try to do, because it's not a pace that hampers my recovery from exercise, but breathing through the nose makes me sweat profusely, and it helps buffer stress big time for me. So when we do that, mid-afternoon or evening after dinner, that's a very, very, very useful tool. So just doing that even in the morning, right, that can still be a useful tool because of what it does to your body's ability to buffer exercise substrates that sort of hamper performance.
I love that. And yeah, we'll address questions like that on our Zoom meetings, which start tomorrow for our course. And then one other thing I really love about this is that we've actually included things like cold therapy and red light therapy, how to use these around training, because they're super popular right now. Everyone's talking about cold therapy and the benefits of it, but there's a hormone aspect to it. There's a recovery aspect to it. And you have to be smart about when you implement it if you are going to be doing training. And same thing with red light therapy. So there's a ton. If you guys can't tell, Rob is extremely knowledgeable when it comes to hormones, exercise, all of these things. So I'm super excited to start our Zoom meetings tomorrow and kick everything off.
Yeah, I hope you guys come with some good questions.
Yeah, awesome. Well, if you guys are interested in anything we talked about, make sure to check out the quantum exercise course. It's linked in my bio. If you're watching on YouTube, it's down in the show notes. And yeah, thank you, Rob, for taking time out of the day to talk today.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.